joining our series for the very first time to share his exclusive and in-depth story is healthcare entrepreneur and self-made businessman Dennis Bastas, Executive Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of DBG Health. Dennis, welcome to the program and a privilege to have the opportunity to share your story. In researching your career, I understand that you were born in Melbourne, though your parents immigrated from Greece in the early part of the 1960s. Perhaps let's start there. Tell us a little bit about your family background, if you could.
Yeah, it's not a bad place to start. We're all influenced by that. My father was, in his own right, was a bit of a businessman. But I guess my view of business was it was an income generating instrument. So we had a number of family members that had small businesses, and it was all about creating an income, and they did okay out of it. I had no interest in business. And I was lucky enough that my father's business did okay, and it meant that I could go to uni. I studied engineering, and then I studied industrial design. My interest in life is to do something creative. I studied with a view that the most interesting thing I could do in life is try and leave something behind. And the idea of engineering and industrial design to design things, I had a great love of cars. The idea, my view was that that was more interesting in life. I'm an accidental businessman. The the reason I'm still doing this is because I discovered how to achieve my creative goals in the sphere of business. I wasn't able to go on, and for a number of reasons that had to do with some financial difficulties my father got into in the late 80s, meant that continuing to pursue my studies for design was no longer viable. I had to go and get a job. I had to go and do something to fund my own lifestyle while I looked at that. And that's how I ended up by accident in business. I think the greatest fortune I had was that my first job, which was only meant to be a 6-week contract at Myer, the department stores group, in the area of logistics, was working under an executive who inspired me. He showed me that business could be fun, and more importantly, it could be creative. So I have to say that there are many events in my life which have been a consequence of good fortune. But good fortune creates the opportunities. It's what you do with them afterwards. And I guess I embraced the work, the work that I got into with at Myer, and particularly was encouraged by the guy I reported to for a number of years, and he had the time and patience to help mold me into a different person who could actually work in business. I don't think I had the right discipline for business when I started in business. I had much more the creative, unstructured approach to everything, and the you know I had a lot to learn, and um, I look back, and my journey is full of things that I learned by doing the wrong thing. Some failures at the early part of my corporate career um, were a huge catalyst to helping me build what I now consider one of my strengths is understanding and managing the human element involved in business success.
Let's talk about that creative aspect. As I understand it, you always had a passion for cars and you wanted to move into automotive design. Where did that passion for creativity come from?
I think that's kind of that would not be anything that anyone could lay credit to. I think that's one of those innate characteristics that you're born with, and it manifests every day in my business life. I channel creativity today in the form of doing M&A deals, buying businesses and seeing what they could be rather than what they are, um, working on packaging and marketing strategies. There's so many ways that that I get that creative outlet in life today. Um, but again, it was an unexpected part. What I didn't know was that business can be creative. Um, and I think it's because, again, I said to you, my first impressions of business was that it was an income generating instrument. The reality is that the creativity in business comes when you perceive business as an equity creating enterprise. Creating equity and equity value requires creativity.
So, Bachelor of Engineering and Industrial Design, graduated from Monash University in '88 and then moved to London, but there was a change in economic.
No, I didn't actually get to move to London. That was part of the plan. That was the plan that was missed. I then, after engineering at Monash, I studied industrial design at RMIT for a couple of years in order to put a folio together to apply to the Royal College of Art in London. A successful application, and I was invited to go and interview. And that was at that time that my father had his financial difficulties, and I had to defer my application because I couldn't afford the tuition fees. So it was always meant to be just a temporary deferment. It ended up becoming something permanent that I didn't get to. I didn't get to follow up. I had an interesting story that I'm happy to share with you. When many years later, when I did my first sellout of my business interests before I started again. This is my second iteration of building business, and in 2012, when I sold my first pharmaceutical business, as you do, I went and bought myself an Aston Martin, and I was invited to a cocktail function at Aston Martin with the designer of the DBS, and I got to talking to him, and he actually started at the Royal College of Art in the design school the year that I was actually meant to start as well. So it was an interesting sliding doors moment to see, where a guy who I could have been classmates with, where he went in life and where I went in life. But it was actually quite an interesting conversation with this guy, understanding how his career progressed, and in many ways what should have been my career progression. So not that I'm at all unhappy. It was just interesting to see the sliding doors side of what my life could have been had it not been for circumstances.
You mentioned earlier you found yourself working in logistics with Coles Myer and then later at Village Roadshow. Tell us about some of those formative experiences that you had in business.
I was always wanting to learn, so I started in logistics. But during my logistics phase, I began to, I began to see that I had this desire to build and be entrepreneurial. It was that which led to me moving out of the logistics and retail space, which I'd been in for a number of years, and joined Village Roadshow. In the background, while I was working a day job, was developing a tool for helping organisations present high quality media over the internet when we didn't have the bandwidth for it. So I came up with this concept and paid a few guys to develop some things, and it was that which I presented at one point to Rob Kirby, the chairman of Village Roadshow, that um, started this conversation, and the move that I made to join Village Roadshow. Rob invited me and to come over and said, we're thinking about what we're doing online, and why don't you come over and start the Village Online business unit. So like almost everything I've done in life, I jump in the deep end and quickly have to learn. I think it's actually I would consider that one of my greatest attributes is to learn quickly, but also be prepared to dig in and learn what I don't know, find out from other people. So I did a lot of work to understand, how web pages were built and how the dot-com era was developing. So we were right at the cusp of that. And so that's how I moved out of, one industry into another. And I was in the, IT dot-com era right up until the crash in 2001, 2002, which then led to what do I do next? And that was another fork in the road. I could either have gone, looked for, and I actually did, think about going back into big corporate in the more sensible e-commerce based, to use my knowledge of the area, or I thought about what would be what's an emerging area that I could get into, that I could use the things that I'd learned about startup businesses and access to capital and all those other skills that I learned during my dot-com phase, but apply them to a new and emerging era, and that was in medicines. So I looked at the fact that we were moving into an era of biologic medication, new manufacturing methodologies, new technologies, something I'd never done before, but I taught myself a whole lot of things about what I needed to know if I was going to go and approach the people and suggest that they might invest in a venture, and what would be the right thing for me to do. So I gave myself I actually asked my wife for permission to not go and get a job for I said 12 months, and we'll I'll either make something happen or I'll go back and work. It took 18 months before I was able to launch the pharmaceutical business and start getting, some kind of income again, which happened to also coincide with the time that we were having our first. We just had our first child, and we're having our second child during that 2-year period, and that became the basis for what I'm doing today. But there was a moment where I think I knew I was running up against the clock, and maybe this journey of entrepreneurialism was not going to work out for me. But I stuck at it. It took just a little bit longer than I thought, and so in mid 2003, my first pharmaceutical business, a company called Gene Farm, was went live, and we started licensing products, and it became the basis of all of this, what is today DBG Health.
I want to ask you about your experiences of the dot-com era. You've previously spoken about some of the philosophies you learnt in terms of your approach to business, the importance of managing cash flow, an eye on risk and reward. What are some of the lessons that stand out for you?
The best lessons weren't about the business elements. That usually is logical. as an engineer, um, I've got strong mathematical capabilities. I can logically understand how things operate. The biggest lessons for me during that phase were the human lessons. Um, Learning how people respond in situations, learning how to um, realize that in order to succeed at something, you have to bring a whole lot of people along with you. Um, and I have to say, I had some spectacular failures in before I understood that how to deal with the the human element of business. Um, they were my biggest lessons, um, and I have to say that my failures in that area in my .com journey um, were the reasons that when I started the new journey in pharmaceuticals, and particularly as I took my first company public 12 months after we started it, and had to run a board of directors and had to manage investors. Um, those lessons, the human lessons, were the most important part to my success in the next iteration of my business life. Um, every failure I now see as an important lesson. Everyone who stood in my way, everyone who beat me because I wasn't ready, I wasn't intellectually prepared for, you know, the the human component of business, um, has been part of my success since then. Um, you know, we now have an organisation that operates in so many different areas and spheres of health and um, not only just pharmaceuticals, but now also in cosmetics, etc. Huge range of skill sets required, and a huge diverse range of people involved. Um, some who think a certain way, some who think a completely different way. But getting them all aligned um, to follow somebody with, loyalty and passion and commitment and conviction is that's the secret sauce. And some people may have that naturally. That wasn't me. It was a skill set I had to learn in many ways the hard way. Um, you know, sort of buffing off some of the arrogance that youthful arrogance that you may have, intellectual arrogance that you may have. Um, they're the important lessons, and that was, when I look back at the .com era, they were the more important lessons. Yes, I learned a lot about how the equity markets work and how to raise capital and how to present to investors and how to convince people that you've got a story and a business strategy worth following. Those are all those are all great lessons, but I think I had a certain ingrained skill set there in terms of being able to clearly present and enunciate a logical story. But it was the human lessons that for me were the more important skill set I had to learn to end up here.
The transition into the pharmaceutical sector or pharmaceutical industry in the early 2000s, where did you start when you were analysing the dynamics of that market? You hadn't had any experience in pharmaceuticals, but you obviously saw an opportunity. Give us a sense of what that looked like.
Well, the how I ended up in pharmaceuticals was an example of starting somewhere and pivoting to something else. So my true interest lay in the initially in what was emerging as this monoclonal antibody manufacturing of new biologic medicines. I could see there a correlation to how organisations in the dot-com era, the ones that lasted and the ones that failed. I mean, the greatest lesson I learned in the way to look at business, and DBG today represents that, is I've realised I don't want to be the guy trying to find the mother lode, the gold. I want to be the guy that sells the picks and shovels to the guys who want to chase the mother lode. It's a much more sustainable way to achieve success. It's a little less exciting, but it's the path to success in business. So having seen the dot-com and having been part of the dot-com era, being the guy who was looking for the direct consumer story, I realized that the successful companies, the ones that saw their way past the crash, were the ones that were building infrastructure. The Ciscos and the IBMs, and so the plan was, if I was going into a new space where technology was going to be important, could I find something that had the same principles? What would be look for organisations that were all trying to build something. What's the underpinning infrastructure? And here in Australia, and in fact around the world, there were lots of companies trying to find new biologic-based medicines. But what they were all doing was that they were spending lots of money building the infrastructure to help them, develop and extract these medications. And, we had a couple of great labs here that were emerging, very boring, run by scientific types. No one was really valuing them much, but I could see that they could become the future Cisco of this biologic age of medicines. So I tried to buy one of these companies with some funding, telling a story that, this could be the future platform for lots of companies. I wasn't trying to pick the winner. Like, there would be 50 companies that were trying to develop a medication. I was looking to create the support infrastructure for all 50 of them. That allowed them to do what they were doing at a much reduced cost because they were now sharing infrastructure. Yeah. So it was a pretty simple strategy. The hard thing was that the company I targeted by was actually owned by the Australian government. It was the Walter Eliza Hall Institute's biopharmaceutical manufacturing facility, which was underutilised. And anyway, we got close to closing a deal, and at the last minute it was pulled, and I was at that period where I was over a year since I'd told my wife that we would be doing something, so I had to quickly pivot. But it was during that time involved in biopharmaceuticals that I also became aware of and met people doing generic pharmaceuticals. And again, what I saw was an industry where there was enormous shift in volume away from patent protected. The world's largest pharmaceuticals were coming off patent, and there was an opportunity to get into an industry where, to be honest, there was only one or two competitors. And it was emerging, but the volume and the scale of the business was going to move pretty rapidly. So I pivoted, taught myself everything there was to know about generic pharmaceuticals and who to go and meet. I licensed a number of companies' products, and I convinced my investors to stick with me and pivot away from biopharmaceuticals to generic pharmaceuticals. And that is why we've ended up where we've ended up. It was a moment where I thought, do I chuck this all in or do I find another way? And it's a lesson I teach in here to my guys all the time. There's been a number of startups that I've supported who are now subsidiaries of DBG Health. And the successful ones are guys who aren't doing what they started off trying to do. The successful ones are guys who started off trying to do something, realized that wasn't going to eventuate, but instead of giving up, pivoted using the resources, the knowledge they'd learned into something slightly different, and are now successfully pursuing a sustainable business model. I don't think anybody who backs a startup business, in my view, should count on what they're starting to do being what they end up doing successfully. You back the people. And what you back in the people is their ability to be intellectually flexible, to say, well, we started off doing this, but guess what we found out along the way? This wasn't going to make it work. But now that we understand the business, this is what we should be doing. It's that knowledge in any particular industry, any particular business, that becomes powerful. And no one starts off like that. No startup starts off understanding in depth what it's getting into. And like I said, there's at least 3 subsidiaries of DBG today, which we started off with founders who are still working with me. We've bought out all their equity, but they've got earn-out capabilities. And we've pivoted to something that's similar to what they started off doing, but what they started off doing was never going to pan out. So that's the creativity. That's the beauty of business. That's why I love coming in here every day and seeing what we have to fix, what we have to do differently. If we were done, if I was just coming in here today and watching it all just continue to grow organically, I'd probably sell out. But that's not where we're at. We're a long way from that. If anything, I'm just beginning the third. This is my business career 3.0. 2.0 was getting it to here. Last year, when I acquired 100% of the equity in all of the various businesses that are now, we have our $2 billion worth of revenue comes from, a variety of businesses, from consumer health to pharmaceuticals to, pharmacy services to medical services. Bringing that all under one roof and under my complete ownership was my 2.0 iteration. Today, with all of that under one roof, and the capability and the cash flows and the customer base we have, both now locally and beginning to go globally, I now feel like I'm starting version 3.0. So, and it really is. I recently presented to 200 customers that we have, who wanted to get to know me a bit more personally. So I told a bit of the story, and I realised as I was developing the slide deck that where I really was at was there. That I've arrived at the point in my late 50s where I'm about to start the third iteration of my business journey, and I couldn't be more excited.
Clearly, you've achieved an incredible amount of in just say 22 years of being in the pharmaceutical sector. But in particular, if you look at your career over the last decade or so, there's been remarkable growth. How have you been able to achieve that? I mean, it's hard to get your head around all the different companies within the DBG Health Group. How have you been able to build such a successful business?
Wow, that's a question where I wish I could bottle. You could just bottle the answer. There's there's only one common theme, and that is being under a almost a constant sense of being at war. Business is warfare by any other means. I work in an industry where if I did what I did this year with the same customers, my business might grow marginally, a couple of percent. That's the natural growth. We have since we restarted, since I re-emerged as a pharmaceutical owner in 2015, after having sold my first business, we've had I think compounded growth of over 30%. Yeah. Um, um, we have seen the business that I had today. So in 2015, the business we had to today, which is almost 10 years, it's 9 years. In 9 years, we are now 20 times the EBITDA of the business that I acquired, the business that became the base acquisition back in 2015. You can't do that unless you're taking business from other people. I tell my people that the only way that if they show me a business plan that they're going to grow anything more than a couple of percent, they have to be able to tell me whose business they're going to be taking. It's an awareness that business is that you have to take somebody else's business to grow at the rate that would make it worthwhile. And so you have to be able to clearly be able to see who your competitor is, what their strengths are, what you have to do differently, what you have to do better. Business isn't about these, I don't know, enormously innovative approach every single time to beat somebody out. Oftentimes it's just doing the basics better, doing things that help people do their business. At heart, we're mostly a B2B business. We supply pharmacists. So how do we help them do their business better? A lot of companies think they're about products. I see the products as being a consequence of why somebody chooses to do business with us. Today we sell over 300 medicines to 4,500 pharmacies. So to get to that scale, I had to figure out what we do for them better than anybody else does, what we offer them that is the most value, how we simplify what they have to do in business, which is dealing with patients and running their business. So we expanded into areas that we otherwise wouldn't have. I may want to be selling pharmaceuticals to people, but I also realize in order to do that successfully and to be their preferred choice of supplier, I might need to do other things for them. Today, we have inventory management tools that our pharmacy customers get to utilize, that I've invested in, that we offer to them as an additional service. We don't make a lot of money out of that because that's not our core business, but it supports our core business. So growth for us is a constant, innovative, creative challenge. It doesn't come from, just getting up every morning and doing the same thing. It comes from getting up every day and going, who aren't we doing business and why? And that's the challenge I put to our people. We are never satisfied. I'm never satisfied, which means I can say we are never satisfied because, I guess we have the luxury of an organization that, being a founder in the business, the things that drive me drive the business. And what drives me is just, I'm never satisfied.
You've bought businesses for hundreds of millions, you've sold them for hundreds of millions. From a timing perspective, how have you known when to buy, when to hold, when to just wait and see?
From the outside, I think, it's almost, there have been times, and I've had the good fortune of, I've bought things and suddenly, that particular market space, like our most recent acquisitions in cosmetics, that market space has just ballooned. We bought into the cosmetics market in 2020, and in 4 years we've had a business that's grown 30-fold. 30-fold. Now, Some may say that's just, what is that? Is that prescience? Um, there's a little bit. There's a little bit of that. You have to back you have to have an ability to kind of anything you do, believe that you can pick macro trends. It's not worth doing in what we do. It takes time to get it done. But there's another factor to that. Funnily enough, in many cases, when I bought in the past, I decided to buy a small pharma business doing some things. All of a sudden, that became, wow, how did that become something of interest to people? How did I know it was going to be? Sometimes embarking on the journey to do something creates the something. When we buy something that people aren't interested in, and then I start marketing it and started doing a better job of explaining to people what's there, we create that, what then in hindsight looks like, well, you just bought into that at the right time. It's not always the case. It's not that you just bought into something at the right time. It's the effort you put into changing what people, the status quo or what was going on before you entered that space. So there's a bit of both. I can't say that it would be the height of arrogance to discount that there's an element of luck, the universe aligning with you, other other things happening that help give you a bit of a tailwind. But I often think that if you don't start, if you don't raise your sails, it doesn't matter how much of a tailwind comes, you're not ready for it. And I think that's the best analogy I can use, is that we have had good fortune, but we've also worked hard to make the bets that we've taken, the organisations that I've gone to buy, the billions that I've now spent on acquisitions, and getting behind them has created the opportunity for them to be more than they would otherwise have been. So, it's you can't discount that, but it's also it's hard work. You have to believe that you can find another way. I was actually having this conversation yesterday with one of my team who was presenting a brand we're trying to develop, and the traction has been less than we've thought. So I got a presentation which gave me all the reasons why you could justify the lack of success in terms of the success that I was expecting out of it. And it was one of those opportunities where I could have just agreed with everybody, but that's not how I work. I reminded everybody that there's always 9 ways something won't work and only one way it will. What they were presenting to me were one of 2 or 3 of the 9 ways it wasn't going to work, and presenting that as a reason why, they felt okay about it. But that's not how success is built. Success is built by not stopping till you found the one way, as improbable as it is. Anytime you start and you say that there's only 1 out of 10 ways you'll get it right and 9 ways you get it wrong, you are already embarking on an improbable journey. But the improbable is not impossible. The improbable is just difficult. And it is insisting that you don't ever give up. Failure is not an option in here. Failure may appear like it's constantly there, following you, but you don't fail until you give up. Trying something, it not doing what you expected it to do is not a failure. It's just, okay, that's one of the 9 ways that I can't get this done. So again, I think that's part of building an organization that has to mimic that ethos, but it's got to be that you believe in it, because I had to insist that this group of people kept doing this, even though it was my money they were going to continue to use, and see if they could get there. They were worried that, you know, if we're not going to get there, do you want to should we cut our losses? It's not a loss until you decide it is. And so I just said, we need to find another way. Let's lean in. And to be honest, I woke up in the middle of the night uh, with what I think is a way that they hadn't thought of doing this. So that's the bit about business that I love. So we're now going to find this very unorthodox approach to try and achieve the improbable. We're trying to unseat a well-established global multinational brand. I can't buy the brand, so this is the only way I kind of win in this space. But like I said, it's improbable, but it isn't impossible.
You've been a prolific M&A deal maker and deal doer. What do you look for in a potential acquisition? And then I suppose the second part is what are the critical components to actually get a deal over the line?
I'm always looking for more than just the deal. An acquisition we did a few years back, one of the more interesting elements of that business was a really impressive marketing team, a marketing capability in this emerging social media space that we didn't have. Good business, but again, one of the things that I could see was that this had a really strong platform strategy. So not only what they were doing, not only was that going to be an interesting product, but I could see that this acquisition had the opportunity to establish a platform for other things that we wanted to do. Yeah. I tend to always look for that in businesses. I can't get away from the mindset I've established now over 20 years, where we look for a platform business strategy to underpin what we're doing. Yeah. So, you know, all of our businesses, I can say one of the fundamental elements of them is that they are a platform to support greater business opportunity first and foremost. Then it's about products. It's never just about an individual product. I established the platform first, whether it's a market access team. You know, there are companies that we've acquired that are the largest representative field force in the medical business, so meeting GPs. That business made a little bit of money, but it's a whole different business inside our business because its platform is communication and medical detailing. So we are now talking to companies all over the world who need market access to the Australian market. Conversations I couldn't have had without a team that was a leading market access platform for communicating with GPs. If I'd gone and looked for a product without the infrastructure, I would get nowhere. I bought this team. Yes, it was making a bit of money. I could have just done that as a business, but that wasn't the business. The business was, what does it give me access to? We're now talking about bringing new medicines that have not generic medicines, but new branded oncology medicines to the Australian marketplace because we now have the infrastructure to support that. And I didn't build the infrastructure for one company. I've built it to be able to be a partner with 20, 30 companies and as the preferred channel to the Australian market. So, when we look at acquisitions, they have to fit and they benefit the whole organisation. Recently someone said, so is DBG a conglomerate? It's not a conglomerate. It's a continuum. What does that mean? It's more words. What it means is if it was a conglomerate, we'd be dealing with different customers for different things. We take the customer base we have and we do more for them. And we do more with them. So it is instead of just saying we just offer you pharmaceutical products, we offer you over the counter and health products. We offer health services which bring people into our customer base. So it is it may look like we're a little bit of a conglomerate, but we're not. I look for a constant theme. Everything assists everything else. So as we're growing, that's an important part. And as now we've got some businesses that have global opportunities, we're looking to see what else will support those. What are the things we can take with us globally? So we've identified that now half our business, which you thought was just Australia based, actually has assets that have a global can have a global interest. So it's acquisitions are for me, it's never just about looking at the business and saying, well, here's the P&L, here's the multiple I'm paying for it, and it is that. If we can't supercharge them, then it's not a business that we should acquire. If we can't add value to what they were doing today because of the broader operations of the group, not a business that we should be acquiring. I think that's the discipline in choice. We've never had an unsuccessful acquisition. I think I was quoted once as saying, "I've never done a bad deal." That's not actually what I said. I said I've never done a deal that has ended up being a bad deal. There are times when post the deal we found that things were difficult, that things weren't going the way we thought they were. But we had the capabilities, and because we had other strengths, we turned that around. So I've always managed to, I think it's part of I value this as part of my reputation. I've never acquired a business that we haven't merged successfully, that we haven't grown beyond what we acquired. And that's because of that discipline to say we're not acquiring it just to stand on its own as a conglomerate might. We're acquiring it because we have things that we can bring to it doesn't have, and it can bring things to the business we already have that we don't have. That's the important part for me in terms of deal choices. In terms of deal negotiations, wow, that's there's art and science. No deal negotiation goes the same way. Every one of them has a human element, which is completely random and chaotic. Navigating that is what makes it interesting. And because business is personal. People say it's not personal, it's business. It's actually the other way around. Business is personal. It always is.
What about competing, whether you're acquiring a new business to build market share for an existing business that you've got, or entering a new market? I mean, the pharmaceutical sector and so many of these industries that you compete in are so competitive globally. How have you been able to get a foothold in a market and then grow market share at the expense of the competitors?
There's not a fixed formula. It's the truth about growing market share is always looking at what is motivating the customer you're trying to win. As I said to you, we always have to win business from somebody, right? No matter what we choose to do, even if we launch a product, it's always winning business from somebody else. Understanding your competitor, understanding the customers you're trying to win. It's not a complex formula. It is. I think what's unique to us is the approach we take, the persistence we have, the fact that we're looking to, and we have the flexibility because it's us doing this, and we can say, listen, to win these guys, we have to offer them something no one else has done before. It's always about a level of creativity and I guess persistence. Nothing is more important than persistence. Let me tell you, I preach that in here every day. having the resilience, having people who are resilient, so that when they get a no, it's not okay, I'm out of here, I've got to do something else. It's okay, what do we do next? We have seen that in some businesses, you don't win the business unless you get 6 meetings with somebody, right? As a minimum. So you kind of go, okay, so it's a numbers game. You go, I'm just going to, okay, we know it takes 6 meetings at least. So it's really about making sure that I get to the 6th meeting.
Overcoming challenges, whether in the pharmaceutical industry or in other businesses that you've invested in, or just more generally in your business career, what have some of the challenges been, and how have you been able to overcome them?
Look, the challenges have been too numerous to name. What I can tell you that might be interesting is sometimes the challenge can't be resolved without a completely dramatic approach to the solution. At one point, I realised that there was when we came back into the pharmaceutical business, we were in 2015, and I bought a small company, and market dynamics had changed. There were lots of hurdles, lots of things that were difficult, lots of ways that we weren't going to be able to win the customer the way we wanted because of time to overcome regulatory issues, time to overcome portfolio related issues. So and I had employed somebody because at this point I had decided that maybe I don't particularly want to go back and be a CEO. This was in 2015. I prefer to be a little more of a passive investor. That was an abject failure, and that's why I'm sitting here today. So I let someone run a business that we acquired, and within 6 months, that business had lost a third of its profitability. So doing the right thing by my partner, who trusted, who wasn't here, was offshore. I stepped back in, and when I looked at what we were trying to do, what we were trying to achieve, I realised that there was just the rules, the things that I'd done before weren't going to get us there. And so it was late one night, because I do my best thinking when everyone's gone to bed and I'm sitting, and I realised that there was only one path to overcome a hurdle, which was really it was a roadblock, a massive roadblock in terms of the business structure, and that was it all sorts itself out if I do one thing: acquire my biggest competitor. Like, it was just clear. As I said to you, forget how improbable the thing is. It's the one thing that'll get us there. So it was 11 o'clock at night, but it was, early in the morning in Canada, where the owner of my biggest competitor here in Australia resided. And I picked up the phone and to somebody I'd met once, who was the COO in that organisation, and said, "Listen, I know this is unexpected to hear from me, but I've got a proposition." It just so happened that his response to me was, "Wow, your timing's fantastic, because we've been thinking about what we do." That's what I mean that's why I love business. Like, as long as you're willing to know that there's a path, find the path, and then figure a way to make it happen. The universe does help. This is one of those times when the universe just aligned. But if I hadn't picked up the phone, if I hadn't challenged myself to say, how big does the answer have to be to solve this? Not saying, well, I need to hire some more people, like small things. Knowing that the true resolution was something well outside the square. So that's what it takes, in my view. And that was a significant part on how we got to here, how we've gotten to here. And that's what I'm saying. Those things, when you get them right and you move forward and you gain momentum and you've overcome this thing, then all sorts of other things start to happen. And so that's been my journey. And you might think that, well, wow, that's how many times has that happened? It's happened a few times where the resolution from the time in 20 odd years, the resolution has been something so out of the box. But in attempting to bring the out of the box, solve that, I've had some luck, and the crazy idea has actually been the one that made everything work.
Just a few more general topics to close out our discussion. I found this quote wherein you said, and you sort of spoke about it there, I'm ahead of the game because I'm prepared for things that other people just wouldn't imagine may happen. Expand on that approach if you could.
One of the other key principles in this business is plan A gets you started, but plan A never, hardly ever happens. Everybody has to have a plan B and a C and maybe a D. I would say that plan B is probably 60% of how we get there. Plan C is maybe 30%. But I think plan A is probably 10%. But plan A gets us started. Plan A is important. It's what, gets you started on doing something. But it's never plan A that gets you to success, because when you're setting up plan A, there's so much you don't know. And it's only in beginning the process that you find out these things. And I think it's been a big part of our success that we're always prepared for kicking off plan B and plan C, and in all things. I have one of one of our strategies, one of the things I learned early, this was coming out of the .com era, is having cash, having capital is the most important thing. And then the second thing I learned is, if you look for money when you need money, you aren't going to get it. So I have always been of the view that when we were doing something or we were building something, always looking for capital for what comes next before we needed it. And also making sure we've got capital in case things aren't going to go right while things are going right, not when something goes wrong. Simple things, really simple things, but I'm amazed at how many people either find the fact that there's work to be done, to be looking for money, and if you don't need it, why are you taking your time to do that? You take your time to do that because something's always going to go wrong. It is not a will it go wrong? No, it's a matter of when will it go wrong, because it just is. That's what happens when you're out in the world. Nothing goes to plan. The human factor is chaotic. It's random, and you've just got to almost live with an awareness that when there's elements, you control them. So when things are going good, you spend your time trying to find money, because you won't find it when things aren't going good. So it's one of that has all been a really important part to my journey, starting from a PowerPoint presentation in 2003, which is how I started, and getting to what is today Australia's the largest pharmaceutical business that has ever existed in Australia. There's actually no other, you know, company like us in a comparable market of that scale. It's much more fragmented in most places around the world. Is you know has been a hell of a journey, and I wouldn't swap it for the world. But I got to tell you, if someone was to say to me, "Would you go back and start again?" I don't know that I'd even, knowing what I know, I don't know that I'd even think about how many random events, how many challenges we've had to face going through, that I could do that with knowledge. I think oftentimes the best way to enter something is with imperfect knowledge and a little bit of naivety. But when you're in the deep end of the pool, you just got to swim.
Very final question. What motivates you and continues to inspire you? Clearly, you're independently successful in business and outside of business. You can do whatever you choose to do. Why continue to wake up every day and still be involved in the business when you could be on a beach or a yacht or a jet somewhere?
I love the creativity. I actually love the challenge. Um, I don't, it's not a bad day for me when I come in and things have gone to hell and we've got to figure out a way through them. Um, I actually think you know, that's what being alive's about. If I was sitting on a boat somewhere, when I do go away on a holiday, it's just time for me to think. If that thinking didn't generate something, if there was nothing I was coming back to, yeah, I'm not entirely sure that would be my idea of a great holiday. I think it's a holiday because it just is that. Holidays for me are a time when um, I can think about the things that I may not have the time to do otherwise. I I love what I do. I love where we're at, and like I said, I'm beginning the third phase of my business career right now, and I'm looking forward to it. So yeah, that's probably the answer.
Dennis Bastas, it's been an absolute pleasure spending time with you. Thanks.